welcome back, everyone. And I'm still here with Dr. Paul. Sorry, probably shouldn't call you Dr. Paul. I should probably just call you
I like
Paul.
that one.
So I was wondering, by the way, because, I mean, you already sort of touched on this, but because Southern New Hampshire did already have this hybrid model, it sounds like there has been quite a benefit. I mean, you've got colleagues who are able to talk to each other about how they've done things. So it sounds like the stress really isn't on the academic side of things. As I'm not saying there's no stress, but for your in-person, it really isn't providing for your younger students, for your students who want community. That's where the stress is.
I think it's the harder thing to replicate. So I think our faculty on the main campus who have mostly taught, in physical classrooms, so some of them, a number of them have taught online as well. It's not a small lift. They've got to think about what it means to be fully remote, but they have a lot of help on that one. And learning online for the campus faculty, learning online for the online faculty are pretty similar.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, this other piece, this developmental coming of age piece, that's very different. And it's going to be a lift.
Mm-hmm. So I was reading on the Southern New Hampshire website, or maybe it was a video, where you said that you think that an online course can be just as good as, or maybe even better than an in-person course. And of course, to me, as someone who had this intense in-person education, and let's face it, I'm pre-internet, it existed, but it wasn't widely used when I was in college. That just sounds like heresy to me.
So to a lot of faculty, by the way, as well.
Yeah, exactly. But I was kind of hoping you could address that quickly. Like, how is that the case? How can these online courses just be that amazing?
Yeah, so first of all, I got to contextualize that comment just a little bit. I think that we've all had amazing in-classroom experiences. And I don't want to suggest that that's not the case. And we probably all remember those faculty who blew us away.
Mm-hmm.
I can name them, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot that didn't, right? And students are really good about saying, oh, don't take so-and-so, and take this one, and et cetera. But fundamentally, institutions have very little insight into what's going on in a classroom and the quality of that experience. When the faculty member closes the door on day one, it's a matter of faith at that point, because as an administrator, I don't get to see inside. Mm-hmm. And unless there's, an eruption, if there's some problem, then maybe, once every year or two, maybe a dean sits in for a day, but that's like performance art. And then there are course evaluations at the end, which everyone knows is a problematic instrument at best. So I don't have really very good insight. When I compare that to my, and by the way, as we alluded to, if I've got 20 sections of a class, I'm going to have unbelievable unevenness. And students know this. Students will tell you, like, avoid that section or that section, as I said. When I think about online, I have, standardized course development. So I've got subject matter expert, instructional designer, assessment expert, content experts, all working together in a very robust way. And then when that class is running, hundreds of sections in some of our large online classes, I'm monitoring those sections 24/7. Students are on the platform. We're looking at their performance. Are they in? What are they on? Where are they stumbling? In week 3, why does everybody struggle in that particular week? It allows us to go in and fix that assignment. We're collecting data, longitudinal data, in a way that's impossible in a traditional class. On top of that, I've got a master teacher who's taught that class and proven to be very good at it, checking in on every single section of every class every week. So I'm doing both quantitative, data-driven monitoring, and then I'm having someone set eyes on the course. And a really good teacher can, within 10 minutes, I can log in 10 minutes, like, yep, this is good. Students are engaged, their questions are being readily answered, good conversation going on, looks good, right? So my only point here is that my mechanisms for quality control are much more robust. In fact, most traditional faculty would rebel if we ever said we're going to monitor your sections 24/7, someone's going to look in every week, etc. So our toolkit, now you have to have resolve, right? Just because you can do it doesn't mean that all providers do it. But I think the best are at least the equal in terms of quality assurance measures as the traditionally delivered. And I will tell you that our online students routinely talk about amazing faculty the way you and I would talk about amazing faculty that we had in physical spaces. And we know this from our lives, right? We know that people increasingly in our society have many very rich engagements in online spaces,
Mm-hmm.
right? And why would we think higher education would be less so? In fact, I was talking to somebody, Jeff Slingo, who writes, you probably know Jeff, who writes about higher ed.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about the analogy of online learning to telemedicine. And he had a telemedicine visit with his daughter's pediatrician. And he's like, I'm never going back. It was so much better. It's like, right? And we talked about why. So, it's people shouldn't get defensive if they teach traditional classes and say, well, I'm just as good. It's like, great, like you should be. Like we pay
Mm-hmm.
a lot for full-time faculty to be in that space, and you're amazingly well prepared. And the reality is they're on a curve like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true with online. But I have better quality assurance mechanisms in online.
Mm-hmm. So I see that as a potential positive outcome of COVID-19. And I don't want to say that COVID-19 is a good thing. I want to be very clear. I
Right,
think it's a
for
bad
sure.
thing across the board. But when you talk to the staff at College Coach before, one of the things that I was really struck by is that you really seem to emphasize opportunities that might be coming out of that. And maybe one of them is better online courses, because I confess I took an online statistics course and it was horrible. I mean, I'm not like a statistics.
Yeah,
Statistics is a field that even though I was a very good student, I need a lot of support in, and I wasn't feeling that support.
yeah,
And the drop in hours were during the school day. So
yeah.
I couldn't make it to them as somebody who works. So I'm just wondering if you're seeing this as one of the potential positives, is that colleges are going to have to make this pivot. At least the colleges that aren't sort of like the 30 most selective where people will kind of do anything to go to them. But,
Sure.
most colleges, there's an existential threat essentially. So.
Well, for sure. Well, yeah, here's what I think will likely happen is that we will see a much greater comfort level with online and probably much more hybrid. So when we go back to normal, much more hybrid integration of online. So
Mm-hmm.
that, because you think about this, we also, when we're talking about young students, our traditional age students, we're now dealing with the first wave of genuine digital natives.
Mm-hmm.
So they actually don't live much of their life offline, right? In fact, that distinction is one that our generation tends to make. Like I will say, I'm going to go online and do something. And I sort of look at nephews and nieces like they're never offline. They're at the dinner
Mm-hmm.
table and they got their device and they're kind of they're inhabiting both spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And I think on campuses we will see students demanding and comfortably inhabiting both spaces. So I've got a job in the afternoon, but that one class I need as a prereq is only available then. Give it to me online. Like, why do I have to compromise my earnings because I need that job to be in school? So I'm going to take that online. Or I've got an internship in the West Coast and it's really cool. And I want to go out there. But for that semester, I don't want to not take classes. So why can't I take classes online? I think you'll see these integrations. And look at that, just gives students more flexibility and more options. I think from an institutional perspective, it's just a good thing because they're going to learn. Now,
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't design their learning this way. Like if you were designing a national experiment in online learning, it
No.
would not look like this spring or like this fall.
No.
But the one benefit, as you say, amidst all this sort of, challenge, is that everyone's going to get better at it. They're going to
Mm-hmm.
understand it, and their students are going to demand more of it. And I think that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was pretty noticeable to me. My nephew, who is 17, he went to University of Connecticut for an engineering, kind of class over the
Yeah,
summer. He met, he had a friend there. They got along great. Came back. He remained in touch with him very easily on screen.
yep,
And I asked my nephew where this kid lived because maybe they could see each other, and he's like, I don't know. Like, why do I need to see him in person? Like, it was so irrelevant to him to do that. I'm like, you
yeah,
don't even know he's from Connecticut. It's not a very big state. We might be able to drive you to see him if you wanted. He's like, nah,
yeah. I'm good. I'm
I'm
good.
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So it's interesting because I had this fascinating conversation with one of the chief technologists from one of the big automobile manufacturers, and he said to me, when we were 16, the day that we could get our license, we were at the DMV, which was true for me, like
mm-hmm,
camped outside, right? Because a car was freedom. I
mm-hmm,
could hang out with my friends, you could go see them, you could put 5 others in the car, and you could drive around and listen to music, right? I'm sure you had some version of that, Sally. He was saying today, they struggle to sell cars to teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
The average age of licensure has gone up, and the average age of first purchase has gone up. Why? Because I can stay on my bed in my house and on my computer, I can be in touch with all my friends, not
Mm-hmm.
just five who can fit in the car.
Mm-hmm.
He's like,
Mm-hmm.
he said, I don't compete, and he named a bunch of car companies. He said, I compete with social media.
Right.
And I thought it
Right.
was really telling, right? So if you think about it, when traditional institutions, analog institutions, worry about competition, they're they're competing with social media. They're competing with the internet. They're competing with online polls on their students, and those
Mm-hmm.
students want to be in those online spaces increasingly.
Mm-hmm.
Now, look,
So,
I hear this from parents. My kid doesn't love online. They need structure. They need accountability. I do think there's something about 18-year-olds needing more structured, supportive
mm-hmm.
accountability. So how you create that, like a lot of kids really struggle with online. So you have to think about that accountability factor that you do get in the classroom.
So that's the tricky part. I also think about the students who are sort of a little bit more kinetic almost. Like there are students who sort of seem to
Yeah.
need to be more physically around their friends. And, I think about like football players who are always sort of honestly punching each other and stuff like that. It's a way of relating
Yeah.
that not all students do. But for those students, I kind of imagine that not being in the same space is a little more challenging.
Well, this is
Um,
like, these are among your most socially intense human beings on the planet, right? I
right.
mean, 17, 18, 19-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I was a part of a conversation with about 30 other university presidents. Almost all of them say they're going to open their campus. But when we did one of these anonymous polls in the side of Zoom, fully two-thirds of them said they have zero confidence that they'll be able to stay open. And when we then said, okay, don't have to give it away where you voted, but why would people not have confidence? It was unanimous, because young people can't stop themselves.
No.
They're going to socialize. They're going to break the
Mm-hmm.
quarantine rules. They're going to go out and find a place to socialize, have parties. They're going to fall in love. They're going to make out. They're going to do the whole thing, right? Like that's what
Right.
being young's about. Sorry, Sal, that was probably not.
No, yeah. You don't want to go beyond that, but I think that was
No, no, no.
probably
Like, no,
yeah.
figuratively.
Yeah. No, I get it. So what are tips that you would give students who are, I think what are tips that you would give students, maybe especially those who are graduating in 21, going off to college in fall of 21, but even if you had any tips for students starting this fall, I think that would be great.
Yeah. So I think know thyself, right? So you have to know, and it was really interesting when we've been doing a lot of feedback surveys with our students. There are some students like, I need synchronous, like I need a schedule, like I do better. There are others like, I need asynchronous, right? I need,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm helping my mom lost her job, so I'm helping with the household income, which means I have to work, which means my best time for getting is on late at night. So we have to be good at giving students options. Students have to be good self-advocates. So know what you need, like know how you, and they sometimes will say to students, what are the things that have to be true for you to be most successful in school? Like what has to happen for that to be the
Mm-hmm.
case? And it's interesting how often students don't actually know that immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you are patient and you ask good questions, you can unlock some of that. So I would urge students now to know that and then advocate for the things you need. I think that's critical. Second thing is the thing we would say to every incoming student if they were coming to campus, which is push yourself to get involved. Like get out of your comfort zone and reach out, be involved. And we know this from the research, right? We know that if a student isn't involved, doesn't have a meaningful relationship within 3 weeks, that their chance of attrition, sky high. So
Mm-hmm.
how are you going to do that? Now, schools are going to presumably bend over backwards to make all kinds of opportunities available. You got to sort of push yourself to that.
Mm-hmm.
A third is really a mindset question. If you decide it's going to really suck, it's going to really suck.
Mm-hmm.
So you got this, so you got to think about like, okay, it's not what I chose. It's not the ideal. You've got to, I'm a huge fan of Laurie Santos, the Happiness Lab. I don't know if you
Mm-hmm.
listened to her at Yale, but she would say, how do you peg this? Are you going to look at your year and say, oh my God, it's not what would have happened at campus? Are you going to look at your year and say, oh my God, it's so much cooler than what I was doing last year in high school?
Right.
Or it's so much better than the suffering around me? Like how it's the old, the silver medalists are miserable, bronze medalists are euphoric. Like, wait a minute, silver medalists are looking up at the gold medals, like, so close. Bronze medalists,
Right.
like, look, I'm up here on the medal stand. You're on the medal stand. You're going to college.
Right.
Like, all right. And then the last thing I would say, and Laura, and I'm quoting Laurie Santos here on this one, Sally, she would say, it won't feel this way right now, but this class may be the most bonded class ever.
Hmm.
It's going to be the pandemic class of 2021. And you will have lived through something that you will recall for the rest of your life. It can be traumatic or it can be impactful. That's a choice that you largely get to make. Not all of it, right? If you lose a loved one, that's not your choice, that's
Right.
traumatic. But if assuming that you get through this in a healthy way and you can say, all right, find your way, make it impactful. Don't make it traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the things.
Yeah. So to the extent that they can view things as a positive challenge that they've overcome. I mean, I've actually had some students be really proud of their ability to switch to online learning over the spring and still do well. Other students were more focused on frustrations, but I was impressed with how many students were like, you know what, it was tough at first, but then, I actually got more sleep because I wasn't commuting to school, and I was able to still make it. I was able to figure it out. And
Yeah,
so
and if I
some of
can sort
them,
of, if
yeah.
I can channel Hamilton, you get to write the narrative of this coming year.
Mm-hmm.
Like no one else gets to write that narrative for you. Like, okay, this is the sort of circumstances, but what you do in that context, these are choices.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and choose to make it a great year.
Mm-hmm. All right, great. All right, listen, thank you so much, Paul.
My pleasure, Sally. It's great to be with you.
All right, we're going to take a short break, but when we get back, I'll be welcoming Alex Bickford to discuss maximizing college saving plans to pay the tuition bill.